Welcome to the Goalpost, the podcast where it's all about long-term player development. We're here to talk soccer through a different lens, one that puts the players before the scoreboard and progress before pressure. This is all youth soccer with a purpose. All development, all the time. I'm your host, Jason Glover. Why development must come before winning? Before we even talk about results, we should ask ourselves, what kind of people are we building through this game of soccer? And if the answer is along the lines of being confident or creative, being resilient, then we have to start really focusing on why development must come before winning. Because what do we actually lose when kids stop playing with joy and curiosity? We lose everything. Because the game should be theirs. And when joy disappears, so does creativity. Curiosity is what turns, cones into imagination and a backyard into a stadium. Think of how many times you grew up in the backyard. You were thinking of the World Cup, the final PK. That's your imagination. So when kids start turning and they stop asking what if, and they start playing as if they were trying to avoid making mistakes, and they're not exploring different possibilities with the ball going 1v1, then that's where you start to lose on development. And just remember, being happy isn't just a feeling. It's actually the fuel for development. So the minute that we take away the pressure and the rigid structure or the constant evaluation, then you can actually start building players instead of creating these robots. So what are we measuring when we say a player is so good or this 8-year-old is great? You have to go watch this kid. It's usually what we're measuring is how fast they are, how aggressive they are. The kid that just runs everywhere, has deep lungs, can basically run all 50 minutes of a game. But the physicality, the sharp dribbling and passing, we compare all that type of player to other players, right? But what's unfortunate is that's not a great measuring tool for long-term potential. And instead, what we should be looking at is this player comfortable on the ball? Do they love the game? Are they trying new things even if it doesn't work? Do they bounce back after mistakes? How do they rebound from a loss? Because a kid's future in soccer isn't just basically how many goals you can score at 8 years old. It's how much can you explore, how much can you fail, and how much can you grow at 8. And the question really comes down to, so how can parents and coaches tell the difference between winning habits and growing habits? Try to think of growing habits as taking creative risks, asking a lot of questions, being okay with failure, and wanting to play more, not just winning more. Winning habits, when emphasized too early, that starts to create players who start playing it safe to avoid mistakes. They're doing what the coach says instead of thinking for themselves, or they're doing what their parent is saying from the sideline instead of doing what they're thinking for themselves. And their fear of failure is more than what they're trying to enjoy. So when the fear of failure is exponentially more, then they can't possibly enjoy that progress that we all want kids to go through. And it's a real thing because kids don't want to fail, especially if there's a consequence. So The difference in all of this lies in the motivation of the parent, the motivation of the coach. And for the child, are they playing to improve or playing to just please the parent? That's a tough question because, especially as a parent, you don't really think that you're setting your child up for failure because, of course, you want the best for your child. But sometimes with that approach, you could potentially be harming the development process. And again, speaking as a parent, why is it that we fear losing so much that we're willing to sacrifice learning? And the reality is losing is really uncomfortable, especially if you're a coach, because it challenges identity. If you lose, does that mean you're a bad coach? And as a parent, we sometimes try to protect our child from disappointment. But when you do that, you actually are shielding them from the exact thing that teaches them the most. And that's really tricky, especially when your child is the one that makes the mistake and everyone is disappointed that the team lost and you're holding that weight, and it's overwhelming. But what we have to remember is that struggle is essential and that losing can create a form of clarity. It can build resilience and sharpen awareness. If we're brave, then we just realize that this is a part of the journey. And when I think about a player's value in the game of soccer, if it wasn't based so much on where they play, but how much they grow, I think that would start to shift some of the experiences that are happening within clubs all across the country. So imagine if instead of saying, what team does your child play on, we asked, hey, by the way, what's your kid learning during training session right now? Are they being challenged? Are they still loving the game when they get in the car after training? Because it's really easy to rank and compare. You see the best player on the field and the player that's less developed. And it's easy to stack the outcome and say, well, that kid is going places. And then the less developed player, you go, that kid shouldn't be on this team. But when you do all of that, you're missing the point, because the true value of young athletes is that their trajectory is not based on the current label. Boy, if you could unpack just that statement, I think you would start to understand that these children who are being treated like miniature professionals, they are actually the ones that might be on a tougher road 5, 6, 7 years down the road when they hit their teenage years and everyone starts maturing. So I always try to take a look at, can a loss actually be a really valuable moment? And the answer is yes, if you use it right. Because a loss can offer up a mirror. And you can ask yourself, well, what did we do well? What can we do differently? What did it feel like to fall short? And how did we respond? Because growth technically and rarely comes when everything goes smoothly. And the challenge is to really understand where growth occurs. And if you're a little bit patient, you can find growth in, failing situations. So what does it look like when a club builds players instead of just stacking teams? And this is what I hope to see when I'm looking out on the turf and observing other teams. I'm hoping that we're putting together teams that have players that are switching positions so that they can learn the full game. I'm looking at coaches and if they're encouraging risk-taking and creativity and not just hammering the results. And I want to be able to see players that understand that mistakes being seen as progress, not problems. Teams should be built to challenge players and not just to win trophies. It's really difficult because it's awesome to have a team full of 9 studs. That's a lot of fun. You can win a lot of games. But I think as a coach, you can be challenged and become a better coach if your team has a couple of B-level players, C-level player, D and F-level players. You'd be surprised at how much your kids can actually grow from mixing the pot. Because stacking teams is about now, and developing players is about the future. And so if we are trying to focus on player development, then we need to make sure that we're focused on the entire entity and the long journey. I want to say that if we can create lifelong, passionate players for the game of soccer, then we have to align our actions with that goal in mind. And although winning might get the spotlight, joy, curiosity, growth, those are the things that can create a lasting love for the game that pretty much goes your entire lifetime. This is the Steamers Crew podcast, all development, all the time. I'm your host, Jason Glover. I'm really glad you joined us today on the Goalpost. Raising and supporting young players isn't always easy, but choosing to focus on their growth, their joy, and their character, now that's the right thing to do. You might not see the results right away, but every small moment you invest makes a big difference in your child's life. And remember, all development, all the time. That's not just a motto, it's a promise. We'll be here next time cheering with you.